Let's start with a question. Has anyone made you a promise? Did you believe they would keep it? Did they keep it? When God makes a promise, He isn't like people. People can make mistakes. People can fail to keep their promises. Sometimes people lie, but God always does as He says. And the Lord visited Sarah as He had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as He had spoken. For Sarah conceived and bare Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare to him, Isaac. Abraham was 75 years old when God promised He would give him a son. I don't know about you, but I don't know anyone who is 75 years old with a newborn. And Abraham waited 15 years. He was 100 years old by the time God gave him Isaac. Sometimes we have to wait for God to keep His promise. He is never late, but He always does as He says He will do in His perfect time. It may not be the most convenient to us, but it will be in the perfect time for us. At this point, Abraham probably thought his life would be worry-free. He received the promise he had been waiting for all this time, and now he probably was tempted to start acting on his own wisdom. Now that God had delivered on his end, he could relax and be free. But God was going to test him. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here am I. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. The word tempt here means test. God was about to test Abraham. Years later, after Abraham had had time with Isaac, probably teaching him about God and His promises, preparing him for a family of his own, maybe 10 years after he was born, God was demanding that Abraham sacrifice Isaac to him. This son that Abraham had been waiting 15 years for would die in obedience to God. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and saddled his ass, his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went unto the place of which God had told him. Abraham must have felt sad after so much time caring for his son, comforting him when he got hurt, laughing with him, playing with him. But Abraham was obedient. He trusted God. Even though the demand didn't make sense to him, he still immediately trusted and obeyed God. And Abraham said unto his young men, Abide ye here with the ass with the donkey, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship, and come again to you. Abraham told his servants who brought the supplies to wait for them, and the wording here says that he had faith in God. We will go up and come again to you. He trusted that God would not break His promise. Somehow, he would have Isaac again. However it would happen, he trusted God. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, My father. And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, God will provide Himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. Isaac had apparently been to these before. He knew how a burnt offering was supposed to go. You had the wood, you had fire, and you would sacrifice a lamb to God. But this time there was no lamb. Abraham assured Isaac that God would provide the lamb. And they came to the place which God had told him of, and Abraham built an altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven, and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. Abraham did as God said. He put Isaac on the altar and prepared to give him up. But before he finished the job, God called to him and stopped him. Do you think an all-knowing God would need Abraham to show that he was willing to give Isaac up? No, he did not need Abraham to prove that he was faithful. This test was so Abraham knew he was faithful and trusted God. God knows our thoughts. He knows our fears and weaknesses. He knows the very words we're about to speak before we even say them. He knows us better than we know ourselves. But we don't know how far our faith goes. We don't know how much we love and trust God until we are tested. God doesn't tempt us to try to throw us off track. He tests us so that we know how far we have come, and maybe some weak areas we need to work on still. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. When Abraham looked up, he saw the ram caught in the thicket, and he immediately took it and put it on the place of Isaac for a burnt offering. This is the picture of us today, of what Jesus did for us. Each and every one of us are like Isaac. We are in a place where we deserve death. God provided the lamb, provided the replacement for us in his Son, Jesus Christ. He came to earth, was born as a human. He lived a perfect life and then died for all of our sins. Abraham gladly accepted the ram that God offered. Now it's time for each of us to accept the lamb that God has offered to us. And when God tests us, let's trust him. He knows our struggles, he knows our weaknesses, and he is ready to bless us and help us. Let us trust him.